Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, and I do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation. In the Hedera space, I think we daydream about potential massive use cases, and then one day it just happens. I've been thinking about traditional financial markets being built on Hedera for years, and just last week we heard that the Digital Commodities Exchange is doing just that. Today we welcome their CEO, Stephen, and their CTO, Graeme, to tell us all about it. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So before we really get into DCX, can each of you just tell us a bit about your backgrounds? Stephen, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I have a background in finance, as you can probably tell from the way I'm dressed. I was working on Wall Street, and then I went to China to do fundraising for Chinese companies. I was there for almost 10 years. We took a couple of companies to IPO while I was there. And then when I moved back to Europe and started doing some angel investing, I got interested in two areas, which were agriculture and education. In particular, I invested in a rice plantation, a mill in Nigeria. And that's how I got to look at the way agricultural commodities are traded around the world. I was surprised, as someone who'd worked on Wall Street. I had a Bloomberg and a Reuters screen with real-time pricing and analytics. I was surprised that people in a lot of physical commodities don't have access to that sort of data. And as a result, there's a lot of potential for whether it be fraud or for things to go wrong simply because people don't have access to the data.
I gotcha. So it sounds like you certainly have the right background to start an exchange like this. Graeme, what's your path looked like to this point?
Yep. So not as colourful as Stephen's. I was a developer at heart, primarily in the financial sector, from funds management, insurance, and then from early 2000s all the way through in investment banking, where I was working in risk technology. I started off as a developer and then moved forward and then got into sort of architecture, DevOps, test automation, lean, anything that was going, but always with a specific interest in trying to find use cases that solve problems that we always had at hand. So traveled the globe, very luckily traveled the globe, so worked out of Sydney, now Singapore, but had stints in India and China, as well as London.
I gotcha. Perfect. So you guys, again, seem like you have the perfect background to start an exchange like this. Stephen, what made you and your team want to create DCX?
So when I was looking at agricultural commodity markets, as I said, we found that the technology adoption was very, very low. Basically, it was still stuck at email and PDF. For 20 years, it seemed as though new technologies had not been adopted. And we looked at why that was. And the conclusion we came to was not only is there a buyer and a seller on a commodity trade, but you usually require data from 3 to 4 other counterparties, being freight, finance, insurance, and inspection. And each of those stakeholders needs to agree on the status of the trade in order for it to be completed. And if there's any problem, what you find is there's usually a discussion about whether a particular document or a particular data set represents what was originally offered. And ultimately, that comes down to a problem of trust. And so we saw an opportunity to use blockchain to create that trust by verifying the data, ensuring the data could not be tampered with, and therefore reducing the scope for those stakeholders to disagree.
I gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, Graeme, how exactly have you been leveraging Hedera in the exchange?
Yeah, so how we leverage Hedera in phase one is we're using HCS, or the consensus service. So in essence, what we do is from the moment a company registers, our registration of interest, company registration, where we're taking some PII documentation all the way through from when the people are trading, countering the trades, chatting, and then when it goes on to the contract phase, we generate an internal hash. We then send that hash down to the consensus service, where we then get the transaction ID back, the timestamp, and the Hedera hash. And then we show that information on the UI to allow the users, the traders, to then verify what we have against what Hedera has, and then we link out often to mainnet as well. So we encourage the users to actually go explore mainnet to see what their transactions are saying. And as Stephen says, it's all about building that first level of trust with the users as they're moving off WhatsApp and Excel and DHL and God knows what else they use, but just to get them adopting the platform in the first instance.
Yeah, this kind of transparency is perfect for the financial markets. Stephen, so how much volume does the exchange do, and what commodities do you exchange?
So right now we're running 4 agricultural commodity verticals, which are rice, fertilizer, grains, and pulses. We have over 1,000 users from 50 different countries globally. And since we launched the new platform underlined by Hedera in August, we've seen transaction volumes increasing roughly 100% a month. Remember, it's not just the transactions which are going through, but every time anybody makes a trade request, we will be generating a huge amount of data. All of that needs to be backed up by the Hedera network, and that's something which the users on our platform can rely on when they're seeing whether the person they're about to trade with is reliable, what sort of trades have they been doing, what sort of countries have they been working with. We basically build as full a picture as possible of the trading behavior of everybody on our platform.
So, I mean, with that many traders already working, you're pretty much past the proof of concept phase. You're pretty much a functioning exchange at this point.
Absolutely. When you see a $10 million trade go through, you know you're no longer at proof of concept. And you also know that people must trust both in the DCX platform, but also what Hedera is doing underneath it. In many cases, we're talking about 2 counterparties that have not traded with each other previously. They may not even have known each other previously. So that really is a very strong indicator that they trust the infrastructure that we've built.
Yeah, for sure. So, Graeme, how's it been working with the Hedera tech stack so far?
It's been an exceptionally positive experience from the moment we started. I'm going to talk from the technology and then the people perspective. From a technology perspective, the integration has been very simple. The interfaces are well documented, certainly on HCS, and we've had no issues, or it's been very simple for us to integrate in, both send that message and then receive the message and process that back in within our own environment. But more importantly, the support that we've been given off the foundation through access to subject matter experts or solution architects, or to developers as well, who they put us in contact with to allow us to both collaborate and then test out a lot of our thoughts and concepts, has been vital to the success of what we've been trying to do, bearing in mind the speed of which we wanted to actually deliver into the production environment on the deadlines that Stephen had dictated towards us. So it's been a very positive experience. Going forward, that collaborative effort is something that we really want to embrace, because as we build an ecosystem and the Hedera ecosystem builds out, that sort of collaboration and knowledge sharing can only help us, Hedera, and everybody else who wants to adopt the platforms.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we have so many teams that are building tools for the Web3 ecosystem. We have JoGet, we have LedgerWorks, we have Archaea, and with you guys all working together, I know everything's going to start to move in the right direction. So, Stephen, what jurisdiction are you working in, and have you had any regulatory hurdles at this point?
So DCX is a Singapore company, and we are subject to Singapore regulation. We benefited from a very positive regulatory environment in Singapore, especially towards commodity trading. The government there is very keen to make Singapore grow as a hub for commodity trading. Furthermore, there are a large number of traders and other stakeholders there, especially on the freight side and on the trade finance side. So that means that we have a very significant ecosystem for our business, but also we have an ecosystem which is adopting blockchain and DLT. There are a number of our partners are based in Singapore as well, and I think that's a reflection of the positive environment there.
All right. So, Stephen, staying with you, who will be using the exchange, and are there any names that the audience might recognize?
Absolutely. As I've already mentioned, we have over 1,000 users now. That varies from a small rice collective in Cambodia all the way up to the largest producers of both agricultural goods and also fertilizers. And so we built it in a way that every possible type of counterparty could benefit. And that's not just the buyers and sellers. As I've said, we have service providers like finance and freight providers. Just to give you some names, Maersk has been with us from the very beginning. We get access to pricing, and you can actually book Maersk on our platform. And the large inspection companies, we have 3 out of the 5 largest inspection companies in the world, like Intertek and Control Union. And lastly, we have CIASI, which is the largest insurance company for marine commodities in the world.
Yeah, I know that Singapore is certainly becoming a hub. I actually worked over there for over a year building a couple of ships, and the shipping ports that they're creating there are really amazing. So, Graeme, from a tech perspective, what are your plans for the future? Do you see eventually tokenizing the assets and using smart contracts as we see with decentralized exchanges?
Yeah, very much so. So that's very much in our roadmap for the next 6 months. As we've sort of mentioned earlier, we're trying to digitalize the first 90% of the journey of what is a long contract, and then move on to the last 10%. And the vision that we have is that if you can imagine a trade, we'd like to tokenize that trade. And as then people book within the ecosystem, freight or the shipping or the insurance or the finance or the inspection, we actually add to that asset or that token through its life cycle, which can in essence be 3 to 6 months. And as we build up the attributes on that token, we will then have that available for the insurance companies and the finance companies to then allow for payment to happen automatically without documentation being sent through the post. That's one aspect we're looking at. Other aspects we're looking at the tail end of that journey is payments, allowing digital payments. We've been approached by a number of interested partners who are looking to SaaS the environment. If we would take digital payments, which is an option we're looking at as well. And as we have a lot of identity information, how can we sort of almost tokenize or work with individuals or other providers on the ecosystem to build a tokenized identity, like almost not sovereign identity, but a company-based identity where we can then start sharing information about KYC, AML, credit histories, as well as to help build out that ecosystem. So they're the aspects in the roadmap which we're trying to accomplish in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge first step that you guys have, but it sounds like you have so many more things that you want to leverage in the Web3 space. So how about from the business side of things, Stephen? What are your plans for DCX's future?
So in terms of the next 6 months, we are very much focused on adding additional functionality, which in turn will increase engagement, give our users access to more services. In particular, we will be launching DCX Freight in the next few weeks. And then in the new year, we will be adding more functionality around finance, warehousing, and potentially payments. The other thing we're going to be doing is rolling out our SaaS product. A number of clients want to have their own environment. So that's something that we're going to start offering them in the new year. And we're looking to have geographical, regional marketplaces where we have the right partner who's able to bring on enough of the local relationships that are required to really make a marketplace like that work. We've already announced our first local marketplace in India, and I expect additional announcements for Latin America and Africa as we go into 2023.
Well, I'm certainly really excited about it. Guys, this was a lot of fun. Graeme, is there anything else you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
I've not thought about that question. Very good question. Embrace. My biggest thing is embrace the technology, be open-minded, and look at what can be happening and explore what's there. I think it's going to be a very fascinating 2 years, the way the market's going, the way the technology is going. I think there's going to be some ups and downs on the way there, But this is certainly, from where I'm sat, the future of where I believe a lot of, certainly in the finance and the trade world, that's where it's going to end up, going down this direction. I just don't think everybody's realized that yet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Just
go ahead, Stephen. Do you have any final thoughts?
Add to what Graeme was saying. I think it's very topical at the moment, but we're really encouraged by the fact that the news coming out of the crypto space has not had any impact at all on us. I think when we're talking to clients, they fully understand the difference between what we're doing with blockchain and maybe some of the more negative news that's come out, and that makes us very encouraged. We see that as a sign of the maturity that you're now seeing in the blockchain space. The fact that we are well into the application of a real world use case for blockchain and DLT.
Yeah, you're echoing exactly what we've heard from other people in the space. Mance Harmon just came out the other day, and he was saying that enterprises aren't paying any attention to that. They're just continuing to build value-add use cases just like you guys are. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on today, and good luck with DCX.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brandon. Did it.